Part 2, Chapter 10 of If All These Young Men by Romer Wilson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 2, London, Chapter 10, The Adventurer. Josephine walked up Charing Cross Road singing. It was Friday, 2 days since she had seen James Blanchard, and close on a week since she had seen Sebastian. Dusk was creeping down upon the streets, and everything was a little stilled, a little gentle and sad. In this mood Josephine sang, "There came three fairies a-singing to me, oh, what shall we do, what shall we do for ye? Says I, make me a princess and give me a beautiful starlight dress." The song and tune were spontaneous, and she sang with emotion. "There came three fairies a-singing to me, oh, what shall we do for ye? Says I, make me a princess and give me a beautiful moonlight dress." She passed Vrints and saw a tiny violin hanging up in the window, and above it small violins, big violins, violoncellos, and basses, and she thought, "Chrysleriana Chrysler has lost an arm in the war." All the time she continued to sing. "There came three fairies a-singing to me, oh, what shall we do for ye? Says I, make me a princess and give me a beautiful sunlight dress." She passed the bookshop with Nijinsky and Karsavina in painted wood hopping about on a shelf in the book-lined window. She thought of Spectre de la Rose and sang again with pathos, "Make me a princess and give me a beautiful sunlight dress." Now she sang louder because she felt more sad, but none of the crowds of people heard her. "And when you've got your dresses three, what will you do with E? I'll get me a prince and I'll make him guess what is the name of each my dress. And when he's guessed my dresses three, why then I'll make him marry me. Live happy and long, O dear princess, with your sun and your moon and your starlight dress." Now she hurried across the road by the Palace Theatre, where amongst the clerks and shop girls a solitary Cossack was gazing at the sky. She passed him, and turning the next corner went in at Petit Savoyard, which in those days was the smallest restaurant in Soho. The bell on the door rang, and all the people at the little tables looked up as she came in. They were all intellectuals or upper middle class folk who thought well of themselves. Across the little room, under a futurist panel depicting a contemporary novelist, accompanied by the leg of a lady in a red stocking, Susan and Sebastian sat waiting for her. Still singing her song, she pushed past the diners, and sitting down by Susan, opposite Sebastian, took Susan's hand. "Well," she said, and stopped singing, "your holiday is up, Sebastian." "Worse luck," he answered. "It is vile having to live after dark." She was not at all shy of Sebastian tonight. She felt free and easy. "Look at old Prometheus," she continued, pointing with her thumb at a long panel across the room. "If he was high art I should be unable to eat my dinner. Also the pink human spider about to fall on the two young ladies." The whole room was painted white and paneled with long, narrow, futuristic pictures, all the same size, as crude and highly colored as the pictures in a storybook. "I have swallowed all my coupons," said Josephine. "So have I," answered Sebastian. Madame now came with the menu and said, "What will you have to eat? Meat?" "No coupons," mumbled Josephine. "Some nice little fish for three, then, and some wine?" "Wine?" asked Sebastian, but Josephine smiled and answered, "Cider for me. Everett said I was not to let you get drunk." "Cider," Madame repeated, "for three?" "I won't have any cider," said Susan. "It makes me so hot." And Madame went away smiling that smile which kept the customers pleased with their food, and murmuring, "Two, then, and three fish." "That's Mary Laurie bathing her young," said Josephine, indicating another picture. "That woman throwing the child into the sea. At least we say so." Sebastian drew in his harsh and rattling laugh. "And that is Katherine Jensen, whom you don't know, on her way to the bath." "Really, Josephine," cried Susan, laughing out loud. "And that," Josephine continued, twisting her body round, "that man lying down in the punt is the imitation Russian. Well, so say I." "I saw a splendid spoof Russian outside the Palace," said Susan. "He was a Russian gazing up at the sky," asserted Josephine. "Oh, they are quite incredible." "What was he like?" said Sebastian, laughing again. "He was like a Cossack," said Susan. "He was a Cossack," said Josephine. "Oh, they are all quite unreal," and Susan laughed at her own incredulity. "I like your little Russian cap, Susan," declared Sebastian, to which she replied, "I wonder if we shall ever see the Russian ballet again." "That's all Russia means to you, and the word revolution. You don't believe in Stanislavsky's birds," said Josephine. "What do you mean?" Susan exclaimed. "I wish you would express yourself. Oh, my dear, I must tell you. Who do you think I saw in Bond Street to day? Doris, my dear!" Josephine broke her bread to pieces. Susan's vitality was destroying her sad good spirits, for Josephine accounted freedom from that hard feeling which usually possessed her good spirits, even if at the same time the tears were ready to flow. "Doris what?" she said self-consciously, and looked at Sebastian's eyes to see if she could tell what color they were. She could not. Perhaps it is his glasses, she thought, but Mary wore glasses, and so did Blanchard, and she had seen clearly into Mary's eyes, and knew that Blanchard's were light blue. The obscurity of Sebastian's eyes gave her a sentimental feeling of mystery about him. "Really," Susan clicked her tongue with the energy of her speech. "Doris, you know, keen, looking fearfully nice, my dear, with pearls. Oh, 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 pearls." She contracted her eyebrows, wrinkled the top of her nose, and struck the table with her hand. Sebastian laughed raucously again. "Good!" he cried. "Good!" They were putting him in a fine temper. Suddenly he folded his immense long bony hands against his breast, like a person in the attitude of supplication, and leaned forward, pressing them against the edge of the table. He sucked in his bottom lip, bowed his shoulders, and there came over his face a far-away dreamy look. He had gone down into the war again. He sniffed up one side of his nose and stared blankly in front of him until the food came. Josephine wished to say Sebastian, but she knew that the isolation which the war imposed upon men and women would prevent her doing so, even if they were quite alone. Now she herself, after an hour's liberty in that world which was become to her imagination a paradise, sank down into that region whence she could see humanity and the inanimate world as if through a veil of waters, where the air she breathed was war-tainted, and the sounds which penetrated from beyond came to her ears dulled over the unheard din of war. Tonight, although she was in the restaurant, she saw it from a distance. The sharp rattle of silver and china and glass did not strike their note for her. The brightest shining of the lights, the gayest tones of the pictures were dimmed for her eyes. All the refinements of perception, sense of the overtones, overmovements, and thought expansions which filled the spaces were equally lost to her. There was no cider, so they had a bottle of new Chianti that had not been long pressed from the grape, and presently, to her relief, the wine sharpened her senses, and her surroundings came back to her as if focused through a stereoscope. "No wonder people drink," said Josephine. "It makes you happy." "Does it?" said Susan, without conviction. "Yes," Sebastian added. "It is a great art to get drunk, exactly the right amount." "After this we shall reel," said Josephine. "It is nice," murmured Sebastian. "Fiery." "Yes, but good fire." After supper the three of them stood together upon the pavement outside the restaurant. It was now nearly dark. Each of them was vague as to what they should do next. Each dreamed for a moment of nothing, as if they had been thrown out into a strange world, in the irrevocable way that Adam and Eve were pitched out of Eden. After a few seconds Josephine suggested that they should go to the kinema. "Let's go to a kinema," she said, and Sebastian answered, "Good." The wine had got them both quit of the war. Care, weariness, discontent, and the emotions had left them. They made a rash joke or two, and Susan, who nevertheless laughed at them, felt a little repulsed by their acquired good spirits. There was still a flush of day in the sky, where the old moon rode to her death, and as they passed through Soho Square, the acid green lights of the corner lamps, the pink horizon, and the deep gleam of night among those old beautiful houses and giant blotched plane trees caused Sebastian to laugh softly and to take Josephine's arm. Susan drew near to her upon the other side, and Josephine knew that she was thinking of James Blanchard. "How difficult to tell what Susan suffers, what her thoughts are, and what her wishes," she said to herself. "There is absolutely nothing of tragedy upon the surface." In the kinema they were blinded with a sudden darkness, and as they pushed to their seats in the front row of the balcony, past human hands and knees and heads, Sebastian and Josephine felt joined again with men, but Susan had no such sensation. They sat down. The hall was as black as night, and upon the screen at the wide end of a shimmering shaft of light that passed close beside their heads and out over the abyss, was a blue-toned picture of a seashore in Japan. The cobalt monochrome of the breakers did not destroy the illusion of reality. "Lovely!" cried Josephine, as the surf rolled up and broke. "I can hear the salty din of the waves." And Sebastian moved his hand for her to take. "When I was here last," she went on, "I heard people kissing all round. It is a great place for soldiers and sailors' good byes." Some one behind me said, "What's on the screen now, darling?" and she replied, "Some old rubbish, I doubt." Sebastian moved his hand again, and Josephine put hers into it. "Really, do be quiet," said Susan, laughing. "I am ashamed of you." "I'll tell you worse," continued Josephine. "Let's have it," said Sebastian. She repeated a conversation which she had overheard in a square. Sebastian's loudest laugh came out, and all the people round said, "Hush!" "You really must be quiet," said Susan, laughing too. After this they were quiet, and watched the sea breaking upon the shores of Japan, and Josephine, with her hand in Sebastian's, felt as if she were standing upon that sunny beach, with some young lover of no particular identity. Presently a Charlie Chaplin film, full of large comic personages in violent action, with over expressive eyes, was put upon the screen, and she and Sebastian laughed as they wanted to. That evening, though gaiety was not its source, they felt they must laugh, must have something to exert their faculty for laughter upon. An artificial state of jocosity must be produced, or they would die, fall in with premature age, or crumble out to dust. There was Charlie, immaculately careful of every movement, spare in his gestures, putting to serious use the ordinary accidents of civilization at inappropriate moments, creating a series of false juxtapositions. In the character of an escaped convict he ran up and down cliffs, tipped fat men off piers with the kindest intentions, guillotined gentlemen in doorways, and let an ice slip down a lady's back. Sebastian laughed immoderately, and at one of his loudest laughs, when Charlie, in his tramp's dandyism, appeared wearing an evening suit 5 sizes too large, he bent violently forward and then back, and under the impression that in the haze of noise his action would go unseen, put his arm suddenly behind Josephine and rested his hand upon her left shoulder. And as he did so, like the escaped convict in the film, he had the feelings of escape and of adventure. End of Part 2, Chapter 10, recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.